Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be with you. The timing of this presentation is such that it is quite different than it would have been a week ago. A lot has happened in the past week, let alone the entire year. Um, uh, Austin and I are going to talk to you today about some federal policy developments and how they affect undergraduate research. Um, so we're going to talk where we are in the federal funding cycle. I hope you all know that we just came off a 43-day federal government shutdown. We are sort of getting the engines back up in Washington, D.C., museums reopening, folks returning back to the workplace, facing their email inboxes. A shutdown always has an effect, perhaps disproportionately so, on the research enterprise, since interruptions in grants can certainly affect ongoing work in science. Maybe some of you saw that firsthand. There has been some disruption at the Federal Department of Education on some of the programs that are important to you and the institutions you attend. And then we're going to talk about where we are in the FY26 funding cycle, because the resolution of the shutdown did not resolve the FY26 spending debate, even though the fiscal year 2026 began on October 1st. Congress still has not made decisions about how to fund our federal agencies and programs. So we'll talk about where we are in that, with fingers crossed that that will be resolved by the time you guys are here in March. And talk about what all of this can mean for, your campuses and how you and CUR members can engage in the process going forward. Just as a reminder, there is a diverse and rich community of organizations in Washington, D.C. that care deeply about research, education, higher education, the institutions that you attend. The Council on Undergraduate Research is the voice for undergraduate research, not only on Capitol Hill within the agencies at the White House, but in that community as well. The leadership of this organization interacts with the leadership with discipline-specific organizations, probably other organizations that you belong to or that your institution belongs to. So advocacy is a pretty broad word for the work that the Council on Undergraduate Research and its supporters do in the name of undergraduate research in Washington, D.C. and the research community. I hope you know that the organization supports your mentors, supports undergraduate researchers and institutions across all disciplines, and really is the singular voice for undergraduate research funding and infrastructure in Washington, D.C. I've been doing work for the council for quite some time, and one of the things that I often say is that undergraduate research is so wonderful in so many ways. And from a policy perspective, it is very few places specifically. There are very few programs that focus explicitly on undergraduate research, but it is so many places ambiguously. There are so many programs that can and do fund strong undergraduate research, which can be a challenge from the advocacy perspective, because you need to point out where undergraduate research lives, and also there's almost not a federal agency that doesn't support the endeavor. So with that, I'll turn it to my colleague, Austin, to give you some overviews.
Thanks, Della. So let's talk about the 2025-2026 federal policy landscape and how Congress is currently deciding how to get those research dollars out the door to the agencies for the agencies to spend in whatever direction they're trying to spend them in. So Congress does not do its job a lot of the time in normal order as it comes to budget and appropriations. For years, ever since I've been in this town, they've used a reliance on what we call continuing resolutions rather than actually passing all 12 appropriations bills in normal order on time. There's a host of reasons for that. Perhaps some of y'all that are in the political science research world might have explored why Congress doesn't necessarily work on time and the way it should. But that's the situation that we're in now. And as we saw, there's a 43-day federal government shutdown starting on October 1st that disrupted many agency operations to begin fiscal year 2026. there have been aggressive cuts proposed in the president's fiscal year 2026 budget request, particularly for non-defense research and education, and even with defense research. Throughout the shutdown, when the president was trying to shift monies to either pay the military or pay someone else or try to keep some other function operating, he'd be pulling from defense research activities to do that. So research has taken quite a bit of a hit from the unilateral perspective of the White House and the president's budget. But there's still Congress to answer to. The House and Senate are now moving divergent fiscal year 2026 spending bills toward a negotiation. So as a part of the shutdown resolution, they passed what we call a 3-bill minibus with funding for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Food and Drug Administration, the legislative branch itself, and military construction and veterans affairs. But everything else is currently under a CR, including many of the research accounts that you all care about. So continuing resolutions and shutdowns, why they matter. Continuing resolutions generally extend prior year funding and restrict new starts. For the agencies that have to draft solicitations and get research money out the door, it tremendously slows the process down and frustrates everyone in research world. This happened again over the last 43 days. The fiscal year 26 shutdown paused many of the non-essential agency operations, including some grant reviews and award processing, particularly at the science agencies, NSF, NASA, NIST, and others. And the impacts are uneven across agencies, but felt most acutely in time-sensitive activities like grant reviews that may have been almost done for certain solicitations that went out, say, September 20th, and then all of a sudden they had to pause for 43 days, now pick it back up, figure out where they were. It can have a significant impact in getting money out the door in a timely fashion. All right, so let's talk about the key federal agencies for undergraduate research. The National Science Foundation is probably the most familiar one. It hosts the research experience for undergraduate sites and research grants that support undergrads throughout a variety of different NSF programs, whether it's sector-specific, research-focused specific, whether it's scholarships like the STEM scholarship, LSAMP, and much more. There's also the National Institutes of Health, which provides project grant funding, training grants, diversity programs, and broadening participation programs, supplements that pay students, and but really a focus on health research. The Department of Energy Office of Science focuses on research for energy production, energy storage, all kinds of different opportunities. That also includes internships and research experiences, and even fellowships. There's one fellowship that's funded by the Department of Energy that connects STEM educators with fellowships on Capitol Hill, so that STEM educators can spend a year on Capitol Hill and learn how to become a policy advocate from that perspective. Those activities are oftentimes paused, and particularly the paycheck that those fellows might get because of the DOE funding being paused. There's also NASA, the Department of Defense. The current administration has a different name for that department at the moment, but most people on Capitol Hill, especially the appropriators that fund that department, are calling it the Defense Department still. The USDA, Department of Agriculture, NOAA, and others. And there's discipline-specific undergraduate research opportunities in each of these agencies. There's also research opportunities under the Department of Commerce, research opportunities at HHS, and frankly, almost every federal department has some sort of research line item that can impact undergraduate opportunities. And then we can't forget about the national endowments, the humanities and the arts. They have previously funded arts research and creative projects. They're within a lot of turmoil right now by the administration. The administration has targeted both of those entities for proposed elimination or significant cut. And everything at the endowments is currently on pause as that's being litigated. But those are two entities that are really important to the research world. Nope, I am busy. Reject. Sorry, my phone is going off. All right, grant interruptions. So there are campus level effects. Obviously, delays in peer review and award announcements for new and renewed grants, particularly at NSF. That means that there's a compressed timeline for launching summer and academic undergraduate research programs throughout the year. That can present cash flow challenges when institutions front funds while awaiting federal drawdowns. If your institution happens to be one of those that's in the headlines for being in conflict with the president and the administration, and they put pauses on certain activities there, that can further compound delays and cash flow challenges. And that ultimately results in student-facing impacts. Delayed hiring of mentors, of professors, of teaching assistants. It can affect stipends, travel, supplies, resources, books, you name it. Ultimately, when we see these grant interruptions that are caused by a lapse in appropriations, it has a tremendous downstream impact that ultimately, at the end of the day, impacts students and the faculty that support these efforts. So talking about programs that often support undergraduate researchers, those include, as we're all familiar with, the NSF Research Experiences for Undergraduates, Sites and Supplements. It can be through the NSF Core Disciplinary Awards with undergraduate support written into broader impacts. It can be NIH grants that fund undergraduate assistance and bridge programs into biomed research. It could be the DOE lab internships, NASA internships, and student research opportunities, national labs, National Nuclear Security Administration, and any other of those sub-agencies under DOE. And it can be campus programs that are underwritten by the National Endowment's grants, particularly the humanities labs in digital humanities. And with that, Della's going to dive into why specific agency research programs matter.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Department of Education, and that's because there are programs there that are important to undergraduate researchers themselves to be and stay on campus and be successful. I suppose we should acknowledge that this administration has said they would like to see that agency go away. And they have been actively moving or trying to move a number of its programs either to other agencies or make them much smaller, programs that require fewer staff to run them. If you've been paying attention to that debate, you might have heard that it would take an act of Congress to totally eliminate that agency. That is true. But in the meantime, the administration continues to work to make that agency much smaller via retirements or reductions in force, et cetera. So that agency is certainly smaller today than it was in January, but it still continues to do things that are important to you and your institutions. So I think that we have, those that have done research on undergraduate research know that the financial stability of undergraduates who are taking on the endeavor is important to their success. So access to programs at the Department of Education that help you stay on campus and be successful there are important. Those include TRIO programs and McNair programs, which are known for helping first-generation students and underrepresented students get to college, stay there, and be successful. Pell Grants, Federal Work Study, other campus-based programs also help and can be important when you are considering taking on unpaid undergraduate research or if there is a stipend of some sort available in the project, these programs can be helpful. There are policy shifts at the Department of Education that are being discussed now that can affect you and your peers who are taking on undergraduate research, and we are paying attention to those and are helping her weigh in on those shifts. So Trio and McNair, they have been under examination from this current administration and have been wrapped into the debate around DEI and what federal dollars should be spent on who and how. But the programs continue to persist and are important, and they have bipartisan support at Capitol Hill. And so they continue to exist. There is a piece of legislation that's been introduced on Capitol Hill called the Educational Opportunity and Success Act that would try to change the TRIO program to update it a bit and maintain its authorization through FY 2030. When you are here in March, that could very well be part of the legislative asks that we will brief you on and perhaps ask you to support when you're on Capitol Hill. The other thing that's going on right now is spending. There was a time, and if any of you are political science majors, there was a time when the appropriations debate was really focused in the spring every year. That time has passed. We are pretty much talking about appropriations year round these days in Washington, D.C. So right now, the House and Senate are debating spending bills. Earlier this year, the administration put out its budget request. They do that every year. Every president puts out a budget request every year. It's worth noting that a request is just that. It's a request. It is ultimately Congress that decides what programs get funded. This administration did want to completely eliminate the TRIO program and other programs that are important to undergraduate research. Those on Capitol Hill rejected those calls for elimination, and both of the bills that they're debating now maintain funding for TRIO and other important programs like Gear Up. The Senate is a largely bipartisan bill. It is bipartisan. It has broad bipartisan support from members of the Senate. The House bill that funds the Department of Education is not. It's a partisan bill with only support from Republicans. It proposes significant cuts to the Department of Education, but the higher ed programs, TRIO and Gear Up, do enjoy a proposal for nearly current levels in that House bill. The McNair programs and others, they continue to face strong expectations around various points of measurement, and that will continue regardless of where we are in the spending debate. Folks on Capitol Hill really want to see results from federal dollars and are taking closer looks at results. For those of you that were in the FAFSA process the year before this, I hear it was not a pleasant experience. The word on the street is that this year is better. Hopefully that will continue to improve as the Department of Education implements changes to the FAFSA and its process. They have support for doing that on both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill, of course. It's worth noting that the House and Senate continue to see bipartisan support for the Pell Grant, acknowledgement that the Pell Grant doesn't have the purchasing power that it could or should, and so that it should increase on an annual basis to try to meet the delta between what it is and what it costs to go to college. But for many students, as you know, stable Pell Grants and other campus-based aid is really what they need to worry more about their academic endeavors and undergraduate research if they're choosing to do it. Okay, so this is where we are. We've talked quite a bit about the spending process. The House and Senate have each proposed differing spending bills that on the slide you see here, there's one that would fund the Department of Commerce, the Department of Justice, and the science agencies. We lovingly refer to that bill as the CJS bill. The House bill would propose more cuts to those agencies than the Senate bill, and that will be a theme throughout. You will see that the House bill would propose cuts in a way that the Senate doesn't, and that's just the nature of the two bodies. The House is controlled by Republicans who generally feel like the federal government is too big and costs too much money. The Senate is also controlled by Republicans, but needs collaboration with their Democratic colleagues to get just about anything done. And so there's some tempered versions of those bills moving through the Senate. So the House bill would cut its proposed spending in commerce, justice, and science. Interestingly, it would have proposed a significant cut to the National Science Foundation, The Senate bill does not include that proposal, and is slightly above FY25 spending. Interior, that's where we see NEH and NEA spending. The House would propose significant cuts to the endowments, while the Senate would propose pretty much level funding. The Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education is among the largest of the spending bills. I mean, think about it, it funds the Department of Labor, it just funds the Department of Health and Human Services, which is where NIH lives, it funds the Department of Education, it does a lot of different things. The House bill would propose significant cuts. Interestingly, the NIH would not see significant cuts in the House bill nor the Senate bill. Those cuts would really come at the expense of the Department of Education and other agencies. And the Senate bill, again, we see some temperance there where there's actually a modest increase also in research proposed by the Senate. Okay, I referred a little bit to what's going on at the National Science Foundation on the previous slide. This gives you a little bit more detail. There is trouble in the proposed House bill in terms of support for undergraduate research, but the Senate bill rejects those proposals. The Senate bill, in fact, in some of the language in that bill, goes to great lengths to say the National Science Foundation is important. The STEM Education Directorate is important, while the House bill would eliminate that directorate. We feel very strongly that the broadening participation mission of the agency needs to be preserved. There are things that are going on in the bipartisan Senate bill that are not going on in the House bill. The final number will probably land closer to the Senate. That's also going to be the case for most of these spending bills, as we referenced, that they need Democrats to get bills through the Senate. But we'll be paying attention to the details. Excuse me. We can go to the next one. Okay, so the NIH. The administration had proposed deep cuts to the NIH. Those have been rejected by both Republicans and Democrats in both the House and Senate. While this keeps biomedical research pipelines open, it's a good thing for undergraduate research broadly, that the Congress is not agreeing with the president on what should be the future of the national institutes. You can go to the next. Okay, the Defense Department. There's a lot of research money at the Defense Department. It would take 2 hours to walk you through all the programs there that could and do support undergraduate research. But the big picture here is that basic research is coming in above, PBR stands for President's Budget Request. It's coming in above what the president requested. And DoD investments will continue to enjoy bipartisan support. That bill is always bipartisan, always sees increases, is the envy of many other domestic spending bills. The endowments, as Austin mentioned, are often under fire from conservatives on Capitol Hill. They have weathered those attacks successfully. The final bill we expect to see pretty close to, if not level funding for both the endowments this year. Okay, so we've talked about the Department of Education quite a bit already. The House bill, as I said, would propose a significant cut. A lot of those cuts come at the expense of K-12 programs. And the Senate bill, it pretty much level funds the Department of Education with minor pluses and minuses here and there. Interestingly, the TRIO program got tremendous support from the Senate, particularly in hearings with Secretary McMahon. Members of both parties from all over the country said repeatedly that these programs are important to them, the institutions that they represent, and the students that go there. So we do expect to see pretty level funding for those programs in final bills.
All right. I will take over, Dale, if you don't mind.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. So where will the final numbers land? That's the question that we're all dealing with here in Washington. In short, generally the Senate wins out in these debates in terms of the numbers, but more importantly, it's ultimately Congress's say, and if constituents view a certain program or view a certain line item or view a certain agency as important to them, constituents have a role in influencing that process, and it's making your voice heard and telling Congress that you should be funding these things, you should be doing these things, you should be doing these things, you should not be funding these things, whatever it is. So we'll talk about how we can do that here going forward. But first, let's talk about what specifically all these budget things and different agency numbers and everything else, what this all means for your campus. Budgeting for undergraduate research programs at the moment should assume delayed clarity on final 2026 funding. Campuses may need contingency plans for summer 2026 research programs. And this is on the next slide. Faculty and sponsored program offices should monitor updates from their agencies, NSF, NIH, Department of Education, the endowments, the Department of Defense, on any grant competitions and deadlines. Right before the shutdown, the federal government, across the federal government, published a lot of what we call NOFOs, or notices of inviting applications for grant programs. So keep an eye on all of these things. We do our best to try to provide these to the CUR team so that they're all aware and that they're sharing them with everyone. But especially as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, the agencies are a little bit hand-tied in how long they can keep these solicitations open. So you may typically have 60 days to do an application, where when we get closer to the end of the fiscal year or the end of a funding bill, you may only have 6 days, and that just happened to a massive grant program at the Department of Transportation. So folks have to stay vigilant, particularly if there's a specific program you care about. Just keep an eye on when that solicitation comes out and when the applications due. It can be quite quick. And finally, let's talk about how CUR members can engage and how you all can engage. So the first thing is to stay informed and stay updated on what's going on here in Washington and in your state capitals via the CUR policy alerts and agency funding updates that are sent around and that we help provide to the CUR staff. We invite your students and faculty to share short stories, or if you have a specific case or story about how funding delays, targeted political retribution, if you're one of those campuses, or any sort of tomfoolery happening because of Congress or the federal government with your grants, those stories are very important. And this is what you need to share with your elected representatives, what we hope CUR shares with us, so that when we're on Capitol Hill on behalf of your behalf, we want to know those things so that we can explain to members of Congress that here's what's happening, here's why it's a concern, and here's why you need to use your position to help fix it. With so much going on, members of Congress, as lobbyists, we get to go up there in suits and do all this fun stuff and talk to them, but they're tired of seeing me and they want to hear directly from constituents and your stories. So as much as you can provide that, or we can help provide that, that's what we really encourage. Make sure you are coordinating your advocacy with your institution's government relations and sponsor program offices. This is always a little bit of a chicken and egg situation, but in general, most of your campuses should have a really solid and great government affairs team that knows exactly what's going on with the politics and dynamics between your institution and the representatives that represent the institution in the Senate and the House. But in general, always remember that despite your position as a student or a faculty member and your professional capacity as a member of your institution, every single citizen and non-citizens in the United States have a constitutional right to petition their government. So if there's something that you want to petition your government on a personal basis, not necessarily on behalf of your institution, you have that ability as a citizen or non-citizen here in this country. So just remember that. And then we do really encourage emphasizing bipartisan themes. And right now, that's workforce preparation, innovation, and American competitiveness. regional economic development, and student success. And then I'm going to take the time right now to highlight one more tool that we have available that we help coordinate with CUR, and that's the Action Center. There is a CUR Action Center on the website. Right now we have 2 campaigns up. This is a way to make your voice heard on, particularly right now, we're focused on the budget appropriations process. But it's a very easy way to put a message into your lawmakers, say, here's what we care about. We already wrote the message for you. We ask that you sign on, and then that message is immediately sent off to the congressional office. And thank you, Heather. And they get to hear from you. So please do take advantage of that resource. And finally, we will close out by saying that federal funding and policy decisions in 25-26 are unusually volatile, but there still remains strong bipartisan support for many research and student success programs. Lawmakers just need encouragement from their constituents to make the final numbers happen. So we encourage you to be engaged, make your voice heard. We will talk about how to be effective advocates as undergraduate researchers, as faculty, as mentors throughout the year. But this is an important time, and so we appreciate your participation in this process and look forward to working with you over the next year or so.